Hello, everybody. This is Roger Hanson coming back with you with the strange, the bizarre, and the unusual. I like it. I know that I said I was going to do a couple 15-minute videos, but I rethought it and I decided that I would continue with my live broadcast. Even though this is a live broadcast, I do want to say that it is not me on YouTube doing a live broadcast. I pre-recorded this, and the reason why I've done it was because I'm not really too satisfied with the audio and the video that I've been getting from YouTube live stream. And I tried to do the events, and it was even worse. I decided that I was going to do local recording with XSplitter and also use my Audacity to do my audio so that I could use my Audacity audio instead of XSplitter because at the moment I can't tell if it's really the XSplitter that's the problem or if it's YouTube. So at the moment that's what I'm doing. I'm actually recording this on my Audacity so that I can use that audio instead. And I'll just go ahead and use my Movie Maker like I used to, but instead of having to use my iPad for the audio, I can actually use a microphone with my Audacity audio mixer and add that in. So with that being said, I'm going to get on to the topic. I was talking about alchemy, and I started getting into a lot of the history with the Hermetica and everything, and the Hermetica has a lot to do with Egyptian mytho, and a lot of people who haven't really done the research don't really understand much about the Greco mystery schools. The majority of the ideologies and the beliefs that they had in the philosophies and everything, like Neoplatonism, things of that nature, it actually originated from Egypt. Even Plato went to Egypt to study. You know, that's just the way it is. A lot of people from the Middle East did too. So a lot of these mystery schools, their philosophies rotate around old Egyptian ideas that were actually incorporated into the Greek mytho and the mystery schools. So before I get into anything, I want to explain a couple things about, Egyptian mytho and like Thoth and different things that relate to the mystery schools, the gods that were involved with the Egyptian beliefs and in temples and things of that nature. So, with that being said, I'm going to get on with it, I guess. I'm going to start out with Thoth. Now, I'm going to, like I said, go over these certain things that I don't know if you're aware of or not, but I'll read it to you so that you can get so that you can hear it. Okay, this is Thoth. Thoth, perhaps pronounced Yahati or Thothi. I call him Thoth. I've heard other people call him Thoth, but I call him Thoth just because that's the way it sounds. Thoth. Depending on the phonological interpretation of Egyptians' emphatic consonants, was considered one of the most important deities of the Egyptian pantheon. In art, he was often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis or a baboon, animals sacred to him. As in the main picture, Thoth is almost always shown holding a waz, a wand or rod symbolizing power, in one hand, and an ankh, the key of the Nile, symbolizing life, in the other hand. His feminine counterpart was Seshat, and his wife was Ma'at. Thoth's chief temple was located in the city of Kuman, later called Hermopolis Magna, during the Greco-Roman era, in reference to him through the Greeks' interpretation that he was the same as their god Hermes. Now, see, this is where the incorporation starts going on during the Greco-Roman era. They started incorporating gods from Egypt and Greece into one. Shimonin in the Coptic rendering. In that city, he led the Ogdoad pantheon of 8 principal deities. He also had numerous shrines within the city of Abydos, Hersert, Urit, Per-Ab, Rekhai, Ta'ar, Sep, Hot, Selket, Talmissus, Anksha, Mutet, Ba, Aman, Hari, Ab, and Takins. Thoth played many vital and prominent roles in Egyptian mythology, such as maintaining the universe and being one of the 2 deities, the other being Ma'at, who stood on either side of Ra's boat. In the later history of ancient Egypt, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes, the art of magic, the system of writing, the development of science, and the judgment of the dead. Now, see, with me, I relate Enki from the Babylonian, not really the Babylonian, but the Sumerians' beliefs as being Thoth. Because, well, if you go according to Sitchin believed that Ra was actually Marduk, the son of Enki. And I personally believe that if his translations are correct, then Thoth would be the equivalence of Enki. Okay. The Egyptian pronunciation of Dhwty, D-H-W-T-Y, is not fully known, but may be reconstructed as Duhati, based on the ancient Greek borrowing Thoth or Thuet, and the fact that it evolved into Sohitic Coptic variously as Thout or Thoth or Thoot or Thaot, spelled T-H-O-O-U-T, T-H-O-T-H, and T-H-O-O-T. Also T-H-A-U-T, as well as Bohairic Coptic, which is T-H-O-O-U-T. The final Y may even have been pronounced as a consonant, not a vowel. However, many write D-J-E-U-T-Y. inserting the letter E automatically between consonants in Egyptian words, and writing W as U as a convention of convenience for English speakers, not the transliteration employed by Egyptologists. According to Theodore Hopfer, Thoth's Egyptian name, written as DHWTY, all lowercase, originated from DHW, claimed to be the oldest known name for the abyss, although normally written as HBJ. The addition of TY denotes that he possesses the attributes of the abyss. Hence, his name means he who is like the abyss. DJEHUTY, capital D, is sometimes alternatively rendered as Jehuti, Jehuti, Tahuti, Tahuty, Tehuti, Tehuty, Zehuti, Zehuty, and Techu, Techu, or Tetu, Tetu. Thoth, also thought or thought, is the Greek version derived from the letters DHWTY, all lowercase. Not counting differences in spelling, Thoth had many names and titles like other goddesses and gods. Similarly, each pharaoh, considered a god himself, had 5 different names used in public. Among the names used are A, just capital A, Sheps, Sheps, with capital S at the beginning, and then Lord of Khmenu, Khemennnu, capital K at the beginning, Asten, Asten, Khenti, Khent, capital K, Mehi, Mehi, capital M at the beginning, and then Hab, Hab, capital H at the beginning, and Aan, A, and then A-N with a capital A at the beginning. In addition, Thoth was also known by specific aspects of himself. For instance, the moon god Ea, or Ea de Jehuti, which is Iahdehuty. Now, Ea is also a term that is used with Enki in the Sumerian texts. It is Enki Ea. And then you have Enlil. Just wanted to bring that up. Representing the moon for the entire month. Okay. The Greeks related Thoth to their god Hermes due to his similar attributes and functions. One of Thoth's titles, 3 times great, was translated to the Greek, making Hermes Trismegistus, which is used in the Hermetic beliefs. They incorporated the Hermes Trismegistus, and I've seen photos that were taken during the time that the Greek occupied Egypt, and it's pretty interesting how you see a lot of the symbolism that's there, and it relates to the Hermetic societies. Like, there's actually statues with their foot extended out, which is a symbolic uh, it's a symbol for the Hermetic societies. They always step out with, I think, their right foot, but that's really old school. That's one of their symbols. Okay. Thoth has been depicted in many ways depending on the era of the aspect the artist wished to convey. Usually he is in his human form with the head of an abyss. In this form he can be represented as the reckoner of times and seasons by the headdress of the lunar disk setting on top of a crescent moon resting on his head. When depicted as a form of Shu or Ankur, he was depicted to be wearing the respective god headdress. Sometimes when he was seen in art to be wearing the Atef crown or the united crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. When not depicted in this common form, he sometimes takes the form of the abyss directly. Now, when they talk about the united crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, you have to understand that at one time Egypt was not one country. It was actually Upper and Lower Egypt. And I forgot who it was, but there was a pharaoh who actually united the kingdom into one kingdom, the kingdom of Egypt that everybody's aware of. But at one time, that wasn't the case. Okay, Thoth's role in Egypt mythology were many. He served as a mediating power, especially between good and evil, making sure neither had a decisive victory over the other. He also served as scribe of the gods, credited with the invention of writing and alphabets, hieroglyphs themselves. Basically, that's what it is, hieroglyphs. And in the underworld, Duat, he appeared as an ape, on the capital A and then A-N, the god of equilibrium, who reported when the scales weighed the decreased heart against the feather, representing the principle of Ma'at was exactly even. Now, when it comes to the underworld and the Duat and the equilibrium and the scales weighing the decreased heart against the feather, I'll get into that and explain it a little bit more here later on, but that is very important because this was a part of their death rituals. The ancient Egyptians regarded Thoth as one, self-begotten and self-produced. He was the master of both physical and moral, the divine law. Making proper use of Ma'at, he is credited with making the calculations for the establishment of the heavens, stars, earth, and everything in them. Compare this to how his feminine counterpart, Ma'at, was the force which maintained the universe. He is said to direct the motions of the heavenly bodies. Without his words, the Egyptians believed the gods would not exist. His power was unlimited in the underworld and rivaled that of Ra and Osiris. Now, I'm also going to mention this about the underworld. The Egyptians' idea of heaven wasn't the same as what the Christians were, or the Jews, or any of these people who believed it. The underworld was actually the equivalence of what heaven was to them, and it's really strange. It'll explain it as I read on. and I'll let the words just come out of the writing rather than try to explain it myself. But just understand that the whole concept wasn't the same. It's just like we call the sky today the sky, but back in those days it was referred to as the firmament. You know, just different concepts. Okay. The Egyptians credited him as the author of all works of science, religion, philosophy, and magic. The Greeks further declared him the inventor of astronomy, astrology, the science of numbers, mathematics, geometry, land surveying, medicine, botany, theology, civilized government, the alphabet, reading, writing, and oratory. They further claim he was the true author of every work of every branch of knowledge, human and divine. Now, for me, I agree with a lot of that except for civilized government. Now, if you go according to what Sitchin translated in his Sumerian texts, then Enki would fit the profile of Thoth if Marduk was Ra. But civilized government would actually be Enlil. It wouldn't be Enki. That's where I really split terms. But the rest of it, yeah. I mean, mathematics, geometry, you know, theology. Well, theology might be Enlil as well. The alphabet, reading, writing, and oratory. All of that would be Enki, but Enlil would be theology and civilized government. Thoth has, and forgive me for saying Thoth if it annoys you guys, but I'm not really good with saying Toth. If I see Thoth, I say Thoth. Thoth has played a prominent role in many of the Egyptian myths, displaying his role as arbitrator. He has overseen the 3 epic battles between good and evil. All 3 battles were fundamentally the same and belonged to different periods. The first battle took place between Ra and Apophis, the second between Haru, Bakhutet, and Set, and the third between Horus, the son of Osiris, and Set. In each instance, the former god represented order, while the latter represented chaos. If one god was seriously injured, Thoth would heal him to prevent either from overtaking the other. Thoth was also prominent in the Osiris myth, being of great aid to Isis. After Isis gathered together the pieces of Osiris's dismembered body, he gave her the words to resurrect him so she could be impregnated and bring forth Horus. When Horus was slain, Thoth gave the magic to resurrect him as well. Thoth was the god who always speaks the words that fulfill the wishes of Ra. The mythology also credits him with the creation of the 365-day calendar. Originally, according to the myth, the year was 360 days long, and Nut was sterile during these days, unable to bear children. Thoth gambled with the moon for 72nd and its light, which is 360 into 72 equals 5, or 5 days, and won during these 5 days. Nut gave birth to Keru, Horus the elder, face of heaven, Osiris, Set, Isis, and Nephilis. Okay, so now, when I also mentioned, thought I'd also like to talk about him being the mediator and how good and evil, he makes it to where good and evil don't defeat one another. The one thing that I did notice about even not only with Sitchin's interpretation of the Sumerian text, but a couple of other uh, theologists and archaeologists who, even though they're religious, they do interpret, these texts. And from what I get from them is, for me, my idea of the Sumerians are they really don't distinguish between good and evil. I don't know if they understand it or not. I made the comment on linked or leaked on YouTube about that, and I don't see them actually even comprehending good and evil. It's just like with the gods, their belief of the gods is different than the belief in the Jewish God or the Muslim and Christian God, where that those gods or that God doesn't depend on humans, where the Sumerian gods, they depended on human sacrifices for basically like food. And I kind of get that a little bit too in the Greek mythology. I don't know too much about Egyptian gods to really know if that is a part of their beliefs or not, but that's the difference I noticed there. And then also with like understanding the concept of good and evil, because even though a lot of people say that Enki was evil, the Sumerians never indicated that he was evil. I mean, the only thing that he basically did was give humans, consciousness and created them. And after that, he warned them of the flood that was ready to come. So, I mean, in that aspect, maybe, but that really doesn't make him evil. So with me, that stood out to me when it was talking about him not allowing good to overtake evil and evil to overtake good. That's kind of a different concept, which incorporates a little bit of Enki and Enlil. So if that's pro or con, saying that Enki and Enlil is a part of the Thoth mythology and the Ra mythology with Marduk, but I picked up on that. I wanted to mention it. Okay. He was originally the deification of the moon in the Ogdod belief system. Initially, in that system, the moon had been seen to be the eye of Horus, the sky god, which had been semi-blinded, thus darker, in a fight against Set, the other eye being the sun. However, over time it began to be considered separately, becoming a lunar deity in its own right, and was said to have been another son of Ra, as the crescent moon strongly resembles the curved break of the abyss. This separate deity was named Djehuti, which is the capital D-J-E-H-U-T-Y, which is Thoth, meaning ibis, ibis, IBIS. The moon not only provides light at night, allowing the time to still be measured without the sun, but it phases the prominence gave it no. But its phases and prominence gave it a significant importance in early astrology and astronomy. The cycle of the moon also organized much of Egyptian society's civil and religious rituals and events. Consequently, Thoth gradually became seen as a god of wisdom, magic, and the measurement and regulation of events and of time. He was thus said to be the secretary and counselor of Ra, and with Ma'at, which is truth and order, stood next to Ra on the nightly voyage across the sky, Ra being the sun god. Thoth became credited by the ancient Egyptians as the inventor of writing, and was also considered to have been the scribe of the underworld, and the moon became occasionally considered a separate entity, now that Thoth had less association with it and more with wisdom. For this reason, Thoth was universally worshipped by ancient Egyptian scribes. Many scribes had a painting or a picture of Thoth in their office. Likewise, one of the symbols for scribes was that of the ibis, or abyss, whichever way it's pronounced. In art, Thoth was usually depicted with the head of an ibis deriving from his name, and the curve of his ibis beak, which resembled the crescent moon. Sometimes he was depicted as a baboon holding up a crescent moon, as the baboon was seen as a nocturnal and intelligent creature. The association with baboons led to him occasionally being said to have as a consort Ashtinu, one of the male baboons at the place of judgment in the underworld, and on other occasions Ashtinu was said to be Thoth himself. During the late period of Egyptian history, a cult of Thoth gained prominence due to its main center, Khnum, Hermopolis Magna, also becoming the capital, and millions of dead ibises were mummified and buried in his honor. The rise of his cult also led to his cult seeking to adjust mythology to give Thoth a greater role. Thoth was inserted in many tales as the wise counsel and persuader, and his association with learning and measurement led him to be connected with Seshat, the earlier deification of wisdom, who was said to be his daughter, or variably his wife. Thoth's qualities also led to him being identified by the Greeks with their closest matching god, Hermes, with whom Thoth was eventually combined as Hermes Trismegistus, also leading to the Greeks naming Thoth's cult center as Hermopolis, meaning city of Hermes. It is also considered that Thoth was the scribe of the gods rather than a messenger. Anubis, or Hermanubis, was viewed as the messenger of the gods, as he traveled in and out of the underworld and presented himself to the gods and to humans. It is more widely accepted that Thoth was a record keeper, not a divine messenger. In the Papyrus of Ani, copy of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the scribe proclaims, I am thy writing Pelet, O Thoth, and I have brought unto thee thine ink jar. I am not of those who work iniquity in their secret places. Let not evil happen unto me. That is chapter XXXB Budge of the Book of the Dead, and is by the oldest tradition said to be the work of Thoth himself. There was also an Egyptian pharaoh of the 16th dynasty in Egypt named Djehuti, who is Thoth after him, and who reigned for 3 years. Now, Thoth, his titles were Thoth, like many Egyptian gods, and Thoth, like many Egyptian gods and nobility, held many titles. Among these were Scribe of Ma'at in the company of the gods, Lord of Ma'at, Lord of divine words, Judge of the two combatant gods, Judge of the Rekhekhehi, which is spelled Rekhekhui, the pacifier of the gods, who dwelleth in Anu, which is capital UNNU, the great god in the temple of Abtiti, Abtiti, capital A at the beginning, and twice great, thrice great, 3 times great, and also the timeless. So that is Thoth. Now that we're done with Thoth, I want to go from there and discuss the Osiris. No, the Osirian. I'm sorry, I have a bad time with remembering and saying names properly. Now, when it comes to alchemy and the history of alchemy and the Hermetic traditions, Thoth is the one that you really have to pay attention to. A lot of things rotate around him and his cult, and even with Greek beliefs. The Osirian is what I'm going to read about. It's just a short little bit. The Osirian, or Osirion, spelled Osirion or Osireon, is located at Abydos at the rear of the temple of Seti. It is an integral part of Seti's funeral complex and is built to resemble the 18th dynasty valley of the king's tomb. It was discovered by archaeologists Flinders Petrie and Margaret Murray, who were excavating the site in 1902 and into 1903. The Osirian was originally built at a considerably lower level than the foundation of the Temple of Seti, who ruled from 1294 to 1279 BC. While there is disagreement as to its true age, despite the fact that it is situated at a lower depth than the structure nearby, that it features a very different architectural approach, and that it is frequently flooded with water, which would have made carving it impossible had the water level been the same at the time of construction. Your brand says it can be dated confidentially to Seti's reign. Now, I've seen videos of the Osirian too, and there's a lot more there that's involved in just what was mentioned there. These areas within the Osirian have tombs that are in there where they had literally mummified oxes, cows, and they had put them inside of these structures. And these are huge structures, and you walk through and you can actually see where these cows have been mummified and pretty much worshipped and idolized. Basically, it's really strange how it looks, but if you get a chance, check it out, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a lot more to it than just that little bit. At the time when I did this stuff, I didn't really dig too deep into it. I just recently, within the last year, started watching and seeing things being posted on YouTube and in groups about the Osirian. But it is pretty interesting. Because cattle worship is fun. It's very important when it comes to the old religions, and there's a lot of people who do believe that these religions spawned from one central group, so it's pretty good and interesting stuff to really look into. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the Valley Temple of Khafra. Khafra, also read as Khafre, instead of Khafra, Khafra. It also reads as Khafre, Khafre, Khephren, Khephren, and Chephren, Chephren, was an ancient Egyptian king, pharaoh of the 4th dynasty during the Old Kingdom. He was the son of Khufu and the throne successor of Djedefre, Djedefre, which is capital D, and it's also the name for Thoth. According to the ancient historian Manetho, Khafra was followed by King Bakhiris, Bikheris, but according to archaeological evidence, he was rather followed by King Menkaure, Menkaure. Khafra was the builder of the second largest pyramid of Gaza, or of Giza, not Gaza, Giza. Some of the Egyptologists also credit him with the building of the Great Sphinx, but this is highly disputed. There is not much known about Khafra except the historical reports of Herodotus, who describes him as a cruel and heretic ruler who kept the Egyptian temples closed after Khufu had sealed them. Khafra was the son of King Khufu and the brother and successor of Djedefre. Khafra is thought to be the son of Queen Merititis the First, due to an inscription where he is said to honor her memory. King's wife, his beloved devout to Horus Martitis. King's wife, his beloved Martitis, beloved to the favorite of the two goddesses, she who says everything whatsoever, and it is done for her, great in favor of Snefru, great in favor of Khufu, devoted to Horus, honored under Khafre, Martitis, breasted, ancient, and these are ancient records that was written from. Others argue that the inscription just suggests that this queen died during the reign of Khafre. Khafre may be a son of Queen Henutsen instead. Khafre had several wives, and he has at least 12 sons and 3 or 4 daughters. Queen Marisanak III was the daughter of Kawab and Hatefers II, and thus a niece of Khafre. She was the mother of Khafre's son, Nebamakhet, Duanri, Niasir, and Kentetka, and a daughter named Shepsetsku. King Cameronnebatel Caperanebti the First was the mother of Menkari and his principal queen, Cameronnebaty the Second. Hekin Ahedjet was a wife of Khafre. She is mentioned in the tomb of her son Sekhemkar or Care. Persenet may have been a wife of Khafre based on the location of her tomb. She was the mother of Nekar. Other children of Khafre are known, but no mothers have been identified. Further sons include Akmar, Akar, Lunman, and Lunar. 2 more daughters named Rakhetre and Hemetre are known as well. There is no agreement on the date of his reign. Some authors say it was between 2558 BC and 2532 BC. This dynasty is commonly dated 265 BC to 2480 BC, while the Turin King list length for his reign is blank, and Manethos exaggerates his reign as 66 years. Most scholars believe it was between 24 to 26 years, based upon the date of the will of Prince Nekur, which was carved on the walls of this prince's mastaba tomb. I must add a picture there. The will is dated anonymously to the year of the 12th count and is assumed to belong to Khufu since Nekur was his wife. Khafre's highest year date is the year of the 13th occurrence, which is a painted date on the back of a casing stone belonging to Mastaba G 7650. This would imply a reign of 24 to 25 years for this king if the cattle count was biannual during the 4th dynasty. Okay, the Khafre built the second largest pyramid in Giza. The Egyptian name of the pyramid was in Khafre, which means Khafre is great. Alright, the Valley Temple of Khafre was located closer to the Nile and would have stood right next to the Sphinx Temple. Inscriptions from the entranceway have been found which mention Hathor and Babastis. Blocks have been found showing the partial remains of an inscription with the Horus name of Khafre, Wasurib. Marriott discovered statues. So second hour. Last time I forgot. Okay, so now I'm talking about the Valley Temple of Khafra and where it was located near the Nile. And I'm going over the Temple of Khafra. The Valley Temple of Khafra was located closer to the Nile and would have stood right next to the Sphinx Temple. Inscriptions from the entranceway have been found which mention Hathor and Babistus. Locks have been found showing the partial remains of an inscription with the Horus name of Khafra Wesarib. Mariette discovered statues of Khafra in 1860. Several were found in a well in the floor and were headless, but other complete statues were found as well. The mortuary temple was located very close to the pyramid. From the mortuary temple come fragments of mace heads inscribed with Khafra's name as well as some stone vessels. The Great Sphinx and Sphinx Temple. The Sphinx is said to date to the time of Khafra. This is supported by proximity of the Sphinx to Khafra's pyramid temple complex and a certain resemblance, despite damage to the facial structures seen in his statues. The Great Sphinx of Giza may have been erected as a guardian of Khafra's pyramid and as a symbol of royal power. It became deified during the times of the New Kingdom. The ancient historian Metho called Khafra Sufis II and credited him with the rulership of 66 years, but didn't make any further interesting comments about him. The ancient Greek historian Diodorus and Herodotus instead depicted Khafra as a heretic and cruel tyrant. They wrote that Khafra, whom they both called Khephren, in attempt to parody Khafra's name, followed his father Cheops on the throne after the megalomaniac and tyrantly ruler had died. Then Herodotus and Diodorus say that Khafra ruled for 56 years and that the Egyptians had to suffer under him like under his father before. Since Khufu was said to have ruled for 50 years, the authors claim that the poor Egyptians had to suffer under both kings for altogether 106 years. But then they describe a king Menkera, whom they call Mykerinos, as the follower of Khafra, and that this king was the counterpart of his two predecessors. Herodotus describes Menkera as being saddened and disappointed about Khufu's and Khafra's cruelty, in that Menkera brought peace and piety back to Egypt. Today, modern Egyptologists evaluate Herodotus and Diodorus's stories as some sort of defamation based on both authors' contemporary philosophy. Oversized tombs such as the Giza's pyramids must have appalled the Greeks and even the later priests of the New Kingdom, because they surely remembered the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten and his megalomaniac building projects. This extremely negative picture was obviously projected onto Khafra and his daunting pyramid. The view was possibly promoted by the fact that during Khafra's lifetime, the permission of the creation of oversized statues made of precious stones and their displaying at open places in public was limited to the king only. At at their lifetime, the Greek authors and mortuary priests and temple priests couldn't explain the impressive monuments and statues of Khafra better than as the result of the megalomaniac character. These views and resulting stories were avidly snapped up by the Greek historians, and so they made them also negative evaluations about Khafra, since scandalous stories were easier to sell to the folks than positive and therefore boring tales. Sound familiar? Boy, the world just does the same, doesn't it? Okay, Noptoplaya is what I'm going to discuss now. Noptoplaya was once a large basin in the Nubian desert, and the Nubia was South Egypt at one time. It was Nubia, then it was Egypt, which was northern Egypt, and there was North Egypt and South Egypt. And then earlier when I was talking about unifying Egypt into one kingdom, that's what they did. They unified the Nubian kingdom and the then Egyptian kingdom, which was northern kingdom. And they still had problems with keeping it together. Okay. Noptoplaya was once a large basin in the Nubian desert located approximately 800 kilometers south of modern-day Cairo, or about 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel in southern Egypt. 22 degrees by 32 degrees north, 22 degrees by 32 feet north by 30 degrees by 42 feet east. Today, the region is characterized by numerous archaeological sites. Although at present the western Egyptian desert is today dry, this was not the case in the past. There is great evidence that there were several humid periods in the past when up to 500 mm of rain would fall per year. Millimeters is what I'm guessing. 500 millimeters of rain would fall per year. The most recent one during the last interglacial and early last glaciation periods, which stretched between 130,000 and 70,000 years ago. During this time, the area was a savanna and supported numerous animals such as extinct buffalo and large giraffes, varieties of antelopes, and gazelle. Beginning around the 10th millennium BC, this region of the Nubian desert began to receive more rainfall, filling a lake. Early people may have been attracted to the region due to the resource of water. Archaeological findings may indicate human occupation in the region dating to at least somewhere around the 10th and 8th millennia BC. Fred Windorf, the site's discoverer and ethno-linguistic Christopher Ehret have suggested that people who occupied this region at that time were early pastoralists, or like the Sami, Saami, practice semi-pastoralism, although this is disputed by other sources because the cattle remains found at Nebta have been shown to be morphologically wild in several studies, and nearby Saharan sites such as Uin Afada in Libya were penning wild Barbary sheep, an animal that was never domesticated. The people of that time consumed and stored wild sorghum and used ceramics adorned by complicated painted patterns created perhaps by using combs made from fish bone, and which belong to a general pottery tradition strongly associated with the southern part of the Sahara, e.g. of the Khartoum, Mesolithic, and various contemporary sites in Chad of that period. Analysis of human remains by Fred Wendorf and reported in Holocene settlement of the Egyptian and Nubian Sahara based on osteological data suggests a sub-Saharan origin for the site's inhabitants. Several scholars also support a Nilo-Saharan linguistics affinity for the Napta people, including Fred Wendorf, Christopher Ehret, and when I spell his last name, it's Ehret, and by the 7th millennium BC, exceedingly large and organized settlements were found in the region, relying on deep wells for sources of water. Huts were constructed in straight rows. Subsistence included fruit, legumes, mullets, sorghum, and tubers. Also in the late 7th millennium BC, but a little later than the time referred to above, imported goats and sheep, apparently from Southwest Asia, appear. Many large hearth also appear. Okay. Apparently from Southwest Asia appear. Many large hearth also appear. Archaeological discoveries revealed that these prehistoric people led livelihoods seemingly at a higher level of organization than their contemporaries who lived closer to the Nile Valley. The people of Nabta Playa had, above ground and below ground stone constructions, villages designed in a pre-planned arrangement, and deep wells that held water throughout the year. Findings also indicate that the region was occupied only seasonally, most likely only in the summer period when the local lake filled with water for grazing cattle. Careful comparative research indicates that the indigenous inhabitants may have a significantly more advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics than previous thought possible. By the 6th millennium BC, evidence of a prehistoric religion or cult appears, with a number of sacrificed cattle buried in stone-roofed chambers lined with clay. It has been suggested that the associated cattle cult indicated in Nabta Playa marks an early evolution of ancient Egypt's Hathor cult. For example, Hathor was worshipped as a nighttime protector in desert regions. To directly quote Professor Windorf and Schild, there are many aspects of political and ceremonial life in the pre-dynastic and Old Kingdom that reflect a strong impact from Saharan cattle pastoralists. Nevertheless, though, the religious practices of the region involving cattle suggest ties to ancient Egypt. Egyptologist Mark Lerner cautions, it makes sense, but not in a facile, direct way. You can't go straight from these megaliths to the pyramid of Djoser, Djoser. Other subterranean complexes are also found in Nebta Playa, one of which includes evidence of perhaps an early Nubian attempt at sculpture. Astrophysicist Thomas G. Brophy suggests the hypothesis that the southerly line of three stones inside the calendar circle represents the three stars of Orion's belt, and other three stones inside the calendar circle represents the shoulders and head stars of Orion as they append in the sky. Now, before I get started, this is about the early alignments and the star maps of these early calendars that were created out of stones and in the sand, which were found in these areas. And these people that worship cattle were worshiping cattle and sacrificing them in this area, and they're telling you right here that the calendar circle represented astronomical Thomas G. Brophy suggests the hypothesis that the southerly line of the three stones, these stones represent parts of the Orion cluster, is what he's trying to say. If you want to check that out, they have a lot of really good YouTube videos from ancient astronaut theorists that describe that in full, and it's really good. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. Okay, let me figure out where I was. These correspondences were for two dates, circa 4800 BC, and at precessional opposition representing how the sky moves long term. Brophy proposes that the circle was constructed and used circa the later date, and the dual date representation was a conceptual representation of the motion of the sky over a precession cycle. Near the calendar circle, which is made of smaller stones, there are alignments of large megalithic stones. The southerly lines of these megaliths, Brophy shows are aligned to the same stars as represented in the calendar circle, all at the same epoch, circa 6270 BC. The calendar circle correlation with Orion's belt occurred between 6400 BC and 4900 BC, matching the radiocarbon dating of campfires around the circle. Yeah, these circles are pretty interesting if you guys ever want to check them out. It's something to find out about. In 2007 article, a 2007 article by a team of University of Colorado astronomers and archaeologists, 3 members had been involved in the original discovery of the site and its astronomical alignment, has responded to the work of Brophy and Rosen, in particular their claims for an alignment with Sirius in 6088 and other alignments which they dated to 6270, saying alignment. Hold up, let me figure out where I'm at here. Claims of the alignment in 6088 and other alignments which they dated to 62-7, saying that these dates were about 1500 years earlier than the estimated dates. The Sirius alignment in question was originally proposed by Windorf and Melville for one of the most prominent alignments of megaliths labeled the Sea Line, which they said aligned to the rising of Sirius circa 4820 BC. Brophy and Rosen showed in 2005 that megalith orientations and star positions reported by Windorf and Melville were in error. Nothing that, given these corrected data, we see that Sirius actually aligned with the Sea Line circa 6000 BC. We estimate that 6088 BC Sirius had a declination of negative 36.51 deg or DEG for a rising azimuth exactly on the Sea Line average. Melville acknowledged the corrections made by Brophy and Rosen, but concluded the Sea Line of megaliths may not represent the original set of the line stele. We refrain from interpreting that alignment. They also criticized suggestions made by Brophy in his book, The Origin Map, that there was a representation of the Milky Way as it was in 17,500 BC in maps of Orion at 16,500 BC, saying these extremely early dates are as well as the proposition that the nomads had contact with extragalactic aliens are inconsistent with the archaeological record. Inference in archaeoastronomy must always be guided by informed by archaeology, especially with substantial fieldwork has been performed in the region. They proposed that the area was first used as what they called a region ceremonial center around 6100 to 5600 BC, with people coming from various locations to gather on the dunes surrounding the playa, where there is archaeological evidence for gathering, which involved large numbers of cattle bones, as cattle were normally only killed on important occasions. Around 5500 BC, a new, more organized group began to use the site, burying cattle in clay-lined chambers and building other tumuli. Around 4800 BC, a stone circle was constructed with narrow slabs approximately aligned to the summer solstice near the beginning of the rainy season. More complex structures followed during the megalith period. The researchers dated to between about 4500 BC to 3600 BC. Using their original measurements and measurements by satellite and GPS measurements by Brophy and Rosen, they confirmed possible alignment with Sirius, Arcturus, Alpha Centauri, and the Belt of Orion. They suggest that there are 3 pieces of evidence suggesting astronomical observation by the herdsmen using the site, which may have functioned as a necropolis. The repetitive. Look, I lost my spot. The repetitive orientation of megaliths, still human burials, and cattle burials reveal a very early symbolic connection to the north. Secondly, there is the orientation of the cromlech mentioned above. The third piece of evidence is the 5th millennium alignment to Stele to, when I say Stele too, it's spelled Stele. So I could be mispronouncing that. Millennium alignments to Stele to bright stars. They conclude their report by writing that the symbolism embedded in the archaeological records of Nabta Playa in the 5th millennium BC is very basic, focused on issues of major practical importance to the nomads: cattle, water, death, earth, sun, and stars. That is the part that I was talking about that kind of goes into the Osirian too, where before the pyramids were even built, there were these people who were cattle cults basically, and they worshipped and sacrificed cattle, and they used these rings as calendars, and they would literally sacrifice cattle. They found archaeological sites that's just full of remains of cattle that were being sacrificed. And then you find the Syrian or whatever, however they pronounce it. It has mummified cattle within these tombs, and they're covered and sealed in there, and they're literally worshipped. I mean, so it's a very interesting story. At least that's what I've found. A lot of people don't mention the fact that there's cattle inside of those big, stone structures, but that's what's inside of them. I've already known. I found out. Okay, so now I'm going to get over the areas and the ideas of Thoth and everything, and go into the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul. Okay, the ancient Egyptians believed that a human soul was made up of 5 parts: the Ren, the Ba, the Ka, the Sheut, Sheut, and the Ib. In addition to these components of the soul, there was the human body, called the Ha, occasionally a plural Ha. In other words, called the Ha, H-A, and then occasionally a plural Ha, which is H-A-W, meaning approximately sum of bodily parts. The other souls were Aku, A-A-K-H-U, Kabut, K-H-A-I-B-U, and Khat, K-H-A-T. Now the Ib, the I-B, Ib, that's the heart. Okay, it's an important part of the Egyptian soul. No, an important part of the Egyptian soul was thought to be the Ib, or the Jib, which is JB, IB, JB, or heart. The Ib, or metaphysical heart was believed to be formed from one drop of blood from the child's mother's heart, taken at conception. To ancient Egyptians, the heart was the seat of emotion, thought, will, and intention. This is evidenced by the many impressions in the Egyptian language which incorporate the word ib, ib, and then aut ib, awt/ib, which is happiness, literally wideness of heart, and then zak ib, capital XAX/IB, which is estranged, literally truncated, literally truncated of heart. This word was transcribed by Wallace Bulge as ab, capital A and then B. In Egyptian religion, the heart was the key to the afterlife. It was conceived as surviving death in the netherworld, where it gave evidence for or against its possessor. It was thought that the heart was examined by Anubis and the deities during the weighing of the heart ceremony. If the heart weighed more than the feather of Ma'at, it was immediately consumed by the monster Ammit. And Ammit is spelled Ammit, and Ma'at is spelled Maat. Okay. Then you have the shoot, which is the Sheut, and that's the shadow. A person's shadow or silhouette. Shoot. SWT in Egyptian is always present. Because of this, Egyptians surmise that the shadow contains something of the person it represents. Through this association, statues of people and deities were sometimes referred to as shadows. The shadow was also represented to Egyptians of a figure of death or servant of Anubis, and was depicted graphically as a small human figure painted completely black. Okay, then you had the Ren. Your Ren, which is R-E-N, is your name. As a part of the soul, a person's Ren, R-E-N, or R-N, which is your name, was given to them at birth, and the Egyptians believed that it would live for as long as that name was spoken, which explains why efforts were made to protect it and the practice of placing it in numerous writings. For example, part of the Book of Breathing, a derivative of the Book of the Dead, was a means to ensure the survival of the name. The cartouche, magical rope, often was used to surround the name and protect it. Conversely, the name of deceased enemies of the state, such as Akhenaten, were hacked out of the monuments in a form of Dematio Memoriae. Sometimes, however, they were removed in order to make room for the economical insertion of the name of a successor, without having to build another monument. The greater the number of places a name was used, the greater the possibility it would survive to be read and spoken. And then you had the Ba, which is B-A. The Ba was everything that makes an individual unique, similar to the notion of personality. In this sense, inanimate objects could also have a Ba, a unique character, and indeed Old Kingdom pyramids often were called the Ba in their honor. The Ba is an aspect of a person that the Egyptians believed would live after the body died, and it is also depicted as a human-headed bird flying out of the tomb to join with the Ka in the afterlife. In the coffin text, one form of the Ba that comes into existence after death is corporeal, eating, drinking, and copulating. Louis Zabkar argued that the Ba is not part of the person, but is the person himself, unlike the soul in Greek or late Judaic, Christian, or Muslim thought. The idea of a purely immaterial existence was so foreign to Egyptians that when Christianity spread to Egypt, they borrowed the Greek word psyche to describe the concept of soul and not the term Ba. Zabkar concludes that so particular was the concept of Ba to ancient Egyptians thought that it ought not to be translated, but instead the concept be footnoted or parenthetically explained as one of the modes of existence for a person. In another mode of existence, the Ba of the deceased is depicted in the book of Going Forth by Day, returning to the mummy and participating in life outside the tomb in non-corporeal form, echoing the solar theology of Re, R-E, or Ra, uniting with Osiris at each night. The word Ba, as in B-A-U, plural for the word Ba, B-A, meant something similar to impressiveness, power, and reputation, particularly of a deity. When a deity intervened in human affairs, it was said that the Ba or B-A-U of the deity were at work. In this regard, the ruler was regarded as a Ba of a deity, or one deity who believed to be the Ba of another. Okay, then you have Ka, K-A. The Ka was the Egyptian concept of vital essence, that which distinguishes the difference between the living and a dead person, with death occurring when the Ka left the body. The Egyptians believed the Khnum, which is K-H-N-U-M, created the bodies of children on a potter's wheel and inserted them into their mother's bodies, depending on the region. Egyptians believed that Heket, H-E-K-E-T, or Meshchenet, M-E-S-K-H-E-N-E-T, was the creator of each person's Ka, breathing it into them at the instant of their birth as the part of their soul that made them be alive. This resembles the concept of spirit in other religions. In Judaic beliefs and Christianity beliefs, in the book of Genesis, it mentions God creating humans and giving them life with his breath, the breath of God. So that also kind of goes into the whole concept right there. Now we have the Akh, the A-K-H. The Akh was a concept of the dead that varied over the long history of ancient Egyptian belief. It was associated with thought, but not as an action of the mind. Rather, it was intellect as a living entity. The Akh also played a role in the afterlife. Following the death of the Khat, the physical body, and the Khat is spelled K-H-A-T, the Ba and Ka were reunited to reanimate the Ankh, the AKH. The reanimation of the Ankh was also possible if the proper funeral rites were executed and followed by constant offerings. The ritual was termed Se-Akh, S-E/AKH, to make a dead person into an living Ankh. In this sense, it even developed into a sort of ghost or roaming dead being when the tomb was not in order anymore. During the Ramesside period, an Ankh could do either harm or good to persons who still living, depending on the circumstances, causing nightmares, feelings of guilt, sickness, etc. It could be evoked by prayers or written letters left in the tomb's offering chapel, also in order to help living family members by intervening in disputes, by making an appeal to other dead persons or deities with any authority to influence things on earth for the better, but also to inflict punishments. The separation of Ankh and the unification of Ka and Ba were both brought about after death by having a proper offering made and knowing the proper efficacious spell, but there was an attendant risk of dying again. Egyptian funerary literature, such as the coffin text and the Book of the Dead, were intended to aid the deceased in not dying a second time and becoming an Ankh, AKH. Ancient Egyptians believed that death occurs when a person's Ka leaves the body. Ceremonies conducted by priests after death include the opening of the mouth, which is WPR, Whooper, aimed not only to restore the person's physical ability in death, but also to release a Ba's attachment to the body. This allows the Ba to be united to the Ka in the afterlife, creating an entity known as an Ankh, AKN, meaning effective one. Egyptians conceived of an afterlife as quite similar to normal physical existence, but with a difference. The model for this new existence was the journey of the sun. At night, the sun descended into the Duat, the underworld. Eventually, the sun meets the body of the mummified Osiris. Osiris and the sun, re-energized by each other, rise to new life for another day. For the deceased, their bodies and their tombs were their personal Osiris and personal Duat. For this reason, they are often addressed as Osiris. For this process to work, some sort of bodily preservation was required to allow the Ba to return during the night and to rise to new life in the morning. However, the complete Aku, AKHU, were also thought to appear as stars. Until the late period, non-royal Egyptians did not expect to unite with the sun deity, it being reserved for the royals. The Book of the Dead, the collection of spells which aided a person in the afterlife, had the Egyptian name of the Book of Going Forth by Day. They helped people avoid the perils of the afterlife and also aided their existence, containing spells to assure not dying a second time in the underworld. and to grant memory always to a person. In the Egyptian religion, it was possible to die in the afterlife, and this death was permanent. The tomb of Paheri in an 18th dynasty monarch of Nekhem has an eloquent description of existence, and it's translated by James P. Allen as your life happening again without your Ba being kept away from your divine corpse, with your Ba being together with an Ak. You shall emerge each day and return each evening. A lamp will be lit for you in the night until the sunlight shines forth on your breasts. You shall be told, welcome, welcome unto this your house of the living. And that is the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul. Now, you also had lector priest, and lector priest in ancient Egypt was a priest who recited spells and hymns during the official ceremonies, such as temple rituals. Such priests also sold their services to laymen, reciting texts during private epitropic rituals or at funerals. As such, they were some of the most prominent practitioners of magic in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egyptian literature, lector priests were often portrayed as the keepers of secret knowledge and the performers of amazing magical feats. The highest ranking lector priest in a temple, the chief lector priest, managed the temple's archives of ritual texts. The term lector priest is usually used to translate the Egyptian title Hrbhep T, which is spelled HRY/HB.T, which literally means the carry of the book of ritual. The term for a chief lector priest, Haraptp, which is HRY/HB.T, HRY/TP. If you guys can understand what that is, how that pronounced, then good for you. Was so closely associated to magic that in late Egyptian, the southern form Harai Tip became a general term for magician. Lector priests wore a sash across the chest that indicated their position. Okay, I had to step away for a second. Now, I just finished with the lector priest, and now I am going to talk about the field of reeds, which is the Aru, spelled capital A, lowercase a, R-U, which was the Egyptians' equivalents to heaven. Alright, the Aru, field of reeds, heaven, also referred to as Sheket, Hepetet, spelled S-E-K or S-E-K-H-E-T, Hepetet, H-E-T-E-P-E-T, meaning field of offerings, a title for Aru. In ancient Egyptian mythology, the fields of Aru, Egyptian, Also meaning reeds is I, capital ARW is the word, and it means reeds. Alternatives are Yaru, which is YAARU, Laru, LARU, and then Alu, capital AULU, or the Egyptian reed fields, are the heavenly paradise where Osiris ruled after he became part of the Egyptian pantheon and displaced Anubis in the Ogdoad tradition. It has been described as the Ka, a part of the So, or the Nile Delta. Only souls who weighed exactly the same as the feather of the goddess Ma'at were allowed to start a long and perilous journey to Aru, where they would exist in pleasure for all eternity. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul resided in the heart. Those whose heart did not match the weight of the feather of Ma'at due to their sins were excluded. They were said to suffer a second death when devoured by another being, Amit, while still in Duat for judgment. The souls who did qualify had to undergo a long journey and face many perils before reaching Aru. Once they arrived, they had to enter through a series of gates. The exact number of gates varies according to sources. Some say 15, some say 21. They are, however, uniformly described as being guarded by evil demons armed with knives. Aru usually was placed in the east where the sun rises and is described as eternal reed fields, very much like those of the earthly Nile Delta, an ideal hunting and fishing ground, and hence those decreased who, after judgment, were allowed to reside there were often called the eternally living. More precisely, Aru was envisaged as a series of islands covered in fields of rushes, Shekha Aru. Aru being the Egyptian word for rushes. The part where Osiris later dwelt was sometimes known as the field of offerings, Sheket Hetepet in Egyptian. I hope I spelled or said that right. So now, the Amduat. The Amduat, literally that which is in the afterworld, is also translated as text of the hidden chamber which is in the underworld, and the book of what is in the underworld is an important ancient Egyptian funerary text of the New Kingdom. Like many funerary texts, it was found written on the inside of the pharaoh's tomb for reference. Unlike other funerary texts, however, it was reserved only for pharaohs until the 21st dynasty, almost exclusively, or very favorable nobility. It tells the story of Ra, the Egyptian sun god who travels through the underworld from the time when the sun sets in the west and rises again in the east. It is said that the dead pharaoh is taking this same journey, ultimately to become one with Ra and live forever. The underworld is divided into 12 hours of the night, each representing different allies and enemies for the pharaoh sun god to encounter. The Amduat names of all these gods and monsters main purpose of the Amduat is to give the names of these gods and monsters to the spirit of the dead pharaoh, so he can call upon them for help to use their name to defeat them, as well as enumerating and naming the inhabitants of the Duat or Dwat, both good and bad. The illustrations of the book show clearly the topography of the underworld. The earliest complete version of the Amduat is found in XV34, the tomb of Thutmose III in the Valley of the Kings. In Hour 1, the sun god enters the western horizon, Ekhet, which is a transition between day and night. In Hour 2 and 3, he passes through an abundant watery world called Warnes. You spell Akhet, Akhet, all lowercase, and Warnes you spell Wernes. I guess capital W at the beginning. In the waters of Osiris. In Hours 4, he reaches the difficult sandy realm of Sokar, Sokar, capital S at the beginning. The underworld hawk deity, where he encounters dark zigzag pathways which he has to negotiate, being dragged on a snake boat. In Hour 5, he discovers the tomb of Osiris, which is an enclosure beneath which is hidden a lake of fire. The tomb is covered by a pyramid-like mound identified with the goddess Isis, and on top of which Isis and Nephthys have alighted in the form of two kites, which are birds of prey. In the 6th hour, the most significant event in the underworld occurs. The Ba, or So, of Ra unites with his own body, or alternatively with the Ba of Osiris within the circle formed by the Mehen serpent. Mehen is spelled M-E-H-E-N, all lowercase. This event is the point at which the sun begins its regeneration. It is a moment of great significance, but also danger, as beyond it, in Hour 7, the adversary Apep, or Apophis, lies in wait and has to be subdued by the magic of Isis and the strength of Set, assisted by Serket, spelled S-E-R-Q-E-T, capital S at the beginning. Once this has been done, the sun god opens the door of the tomb in Hour 8 and then leaves the sandy island of Sokar by rowing vigorously back into the waters in Hour 9. In Hour 10, the regeneration process continues through immersion in the waters until in Hour 11, the God's Eye, a symbol for his health and well-being, are fully regenerated. In Hour 12, he enters the eastern horizon, ready to rise again as the new day's sun. That's the hours of the Amduat. Now I'm going to talk about the Duat. In Egyptian mythology, Duat, also Tuat, which is T-U-A-T, and Tuawat, T-A-W-A-T, or Tuaut, or Akert, Akert, Amethyst, Amenthus, Amente or Thes, Amenti, Amenti, or Netter Kertet, Neter/Khertet, is the underworld. The Duat, one would think to reside in an area under the earth, but ancient Egyptians often referred to the sky. The Duat is the realm of the god Osiris and the residence of other gods and supernatural beings. It is the region through which the sun god Ra travels from west to east during the night, and where he battles Apep. It also was the place where people's souls went after death for judgment, though it was not the full extent of the afterlife. Burial chambers formed touching points between the mundane world of the Duat, and spirits could use tombs to travel back and forth from the Duat. What we know of the Duat principally derives from funerary texts such as the Book of Gates, Book of Caverns, Coffin Text, Amduat, and the Book of the Dead. Each of these documents fulfills a different purpose and gives a different perspective on the Duat, and different texts can be inconsistent with one another. The texts which survive differ in age and origin, and it is likely that there was never a single uniform interpretation of the Duat. The geography of Duat is similar in outline to the world the Egyptians knew. There are realistic features like rivers, islands, fields, lakes, mounds, and caverns, along with fantastic lakes of fire, walls of iron, and trees of turquoise. In the Book of Two Ways, one of the coffin text, there is even a map-like image of the Duat. The Book of the Dead and coffin text were intended to guide people who had recently died through the Duat's dangerous landscape and to a life as an Ak, AKH, or blessed spirit, among the gods. The dead person must pass a series of gates guarded by dangerous spirits, depicted as human bodies with grotesque heads of animals, insects, torches, or knives. These beings have equally grotesque names. For instance, blood drinker who comes from the slaughterhouse, or one who eats the excrement of his hindquarters. Other features emphasized in these texts are mounds and caverns inhabited by gods or supernatural animals which threaten the spirits of the dead. The purpose of the book is not to lay out a geography, but to describe a succession of rites of passage which the dead would have to pass to reach the afterlife. If the deceased successfully passed these unpleasant demons, he or she would reach the weighing of the heart. In this ritual, the heart of the deceased was weighed by Anubis using a feather representing Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. The heart would become would become out of balance because of failure to follow Ma'at, and any hearts heavier or lighter than her heart were rejected and eaten by the Amit, the devourer of souls. Those souls that passed the test would be allowed to travel toward the paradise of Aru. In spite of the unpleasant inhabitants of the Duat, this was no hell to which souls were condemned. The nature of Duat is more complex than that. The grotesque spirits of the underworld were not evil, but under the control of the gods. The Duat was also a resident of gods themselves, as well as Osiris, Anubis, Thoth, Horus, Hathor, and Ma'at all appear as a dead soul makes its way towards judgment. It was also in the underworld that the sun Ra traveled under the earth from west to east and was transformed from its aged autumn form into Capri, the new dawning sun. Just as a dead person faced many challenges in the Duat, Ra faced attack in the underworld from the evil serpent Apep. Now we will move on to Heka. Heka was the deification of magic in Egyptian mythology, his name being the Egyptian word for magic. According to Egyptian writing, coffin text spelled 261, Heka existed before duality had yet come into being. The term Heka was also used for the practice of magical ritual. The Coptic word Hik, H-I-K, is derived from the ancient Egyptian. Heka literally means activating the Ka, the aspect of the soul which embodied personality. The Egyptians thought activating the power of the soul was how magic worked. Heka also implied great power and influence, particularly in the case of drawing upon the Ka of the gods. Heka acted together with Hu, H-U, capital H, the principle of divine utterance, and Sia, S-I-A, capital S, at the beginning. The concept of divine omniscience to create the basis of creative power both in the mortal world and the world of the gods. As the one who activates Ka, Heka was also said to be the son of Atum, the creator of things in general. Occasionally, the son of Khnum, K-H-N-U-M, capital K at the beginning, and Atum is spelled A-T-U-M, capital A, who created, the creator of things in general, or occasionally the son of Khnum, who created specific individual Ba, another aspect of the soul. As the son of Khnum, his mother was said to be Menhit, M-E-N-H-I-T, capital N at the beginning. And I don't know if I need to say capital M or capital whatever at the beginning of the word, but I've noticed some words are all lowercase and some have capital letters, so that's the way I'm doing it. Okay, the hieroglyph for his name featured a twist or flax within a pair of raised arms. However, it is also vaguely It also vaguely resembles a pair of entwined snakes within someone's arms. Consequently, Heka was said to have battled and conquered two serpents, and was usually depicted as a man choking two giant intertwined serpents. Medicine and doctors were thought to be a form of magic, and so Heka's priesthood performed these activities. Egyptians believed that with Heka, the activation of the Ka and an aspect of the soul of both gods and humans and divine personification of magic, they could influence the gods and gain protection, healing, and transformation. Health and wholeness of being were sacred to Heka. There is no word for religion in the ancient Egyptian language. Mundane and religious worldviews were not distinct. Thus, Heka was not a secular practice, but rather a religious observance. Every aspect of life, every word, plant, animal, and ritual was connected to the power and authority of the gods. In ancient Egypt, medicine consisted of four components. The primeval potency that empowered the creator god was identified with Heka, who was accompanied by magical rituals known as Seshaw, Seshaw, capital S at the beginning, held within sacred texts called RW, capital R and then lowercase w. In addition, Pekret, P-E-K-H-R-E-T, capital P at the beginning, medicinal prescriptions were given to patients to bring relief. This magic was used in temple rituals as well as informal situations by priests. These rituals, along with medical practices, formed an integrated therapy for both physical and spiritual health. Magic was also used for protection against the angry deities, jealous ghosts, foreign demons, and sorcerers who were thought to cause illness, accidents, poverty, and infertility. That is the Heka. Now we get into the Werthu, which is spelled W-E-R-T-H-E-K-A-U, capital W at the beginning. This means great enchantress. Werthu's alts is Urthekeu, U-R-T-H-E-K-A-U, capital U at the beginning, and Werthu, W-E-R-E-T-H-E-K-A-U, capital W with Wart and capital H with Heku, was the ancient Egyptian for personification of supernatural powers. Wart Heku meaning great of magic or great of enchantress. As a deity dedicated to protection, she often appeared in funerary objects, particularly weapons, to allow the deceased to protect him or herself against the dangers of the underworld. She also was placed on ivory knives as a charm to protect pregnant and nursing mothers. Her power was one of the inherent qualities of the crowns of Egypt as goddess of the crowns. She was a snake or a lion-headed woman and dwelt in the the state sanctuary. As the wife of Ra Horakti, which is Ra, R-A, capital R, slash Horakti, Horakhty, capital H. She is depicted with his solar disk in her head, on her head. Wereth Q was an epithet frequently conferred on Isis, Sekhmet, Mut, and others. Now, Sekhmet is Sekhmet, capital S, and then Mut, M-U-T, capital M, and others. That is the great enchantress. And I believe there was something else involved there with nursemaids, and these were like priestess that took care of the pharaoh's children and babies and helped with childbirth and things like that. But I'm not quite sure where all that worked in. Okay, then you had the Mehen, M-E-H-E-N, capital M. That's the Egyptian snake god. In ancient Egypt, the name Mehen, meaning coiled one, refers to a mythological snake god and to a game. The earliest reference to Mehem occur in the coffin text. Mehem is a protective deity who is depicted as a snake which coils around the sun god Ra during his journey through the night. For instance, in the Amduat. In the German-Egyptian dictionary by R. Herring, it is said that the Mehen, M-H-N, or the Mehenet, M-H-N-T, snake is equivalent to the Ouroboros, O-U-R-O-B-R-O-S, capital O, at the beginning. The precise relationship between the deity and the Mehen game is unknown. For instance, it is not known whether the game derives from the mythological character or the character derives from the game. It is known that the object known as Mayhem depicts a game rather than a religious fetish, as studies of paintings in tombs and game boards and equipment demonstrate this. The rules and method of playing the game are unknown, although rules have been created in modern times based on assessments of how it may have been played. Okay, so now we go to the Kuti, which is Children of Horus. Kuti is spelled K-U-T-I, all capital letters. The Children of Horus, who are known to mythology as the solar race, are the Kuti. These are the white spirits, the children of light. The solar race at last attained supremacy as chief of all the elemental powers, and in the eschatology of Kuti are the glorious ones. Now, you can also find out more about them with Ku, which is K-H-U, if you check them out. The seven Kuti as white birds on the celestial waters represent souls or spirits, but as star souls, not human souls, external to human being. The first company of gods, the seven Egyptian Tesu, Tesu, capital T, were also called the Kuti, or spirits, represented by beautiful white water birds. That, for me, kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Sumerian texts and Enki and Enlil and the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were represented as birds, and Horus, you know, the whole thing with Marduk, that all kind of blends in together. That sticks out to me. I never noticed that before until I just read that, but it's pretty interesting. And you also have to remember the close relationship that the Hittites and the Egyptians had with one another, so a lot of their belief systems, I could believe that it funneled down and became saturated as time went on. So now I'll go to Sa in Hu. Sa as in S-A and Hu as in H-U. And these are Egyptian minor gods. The Egyptian god Hu was one of the minor gods in some respects, but he was one of the most important gods of those serious about Egyptian deities. Hu is the power of the spoken word. He personifies the authority of utterance. One legend has it that the creator and sun god Ra, or Re, R-E or R-A, evolved from the primeval waters of Egypt. Once alive, Ra created the air, Shu, and the moisture, Tefnut. Next, the earth god Geb and the sky god Nut were created. Mortal men and women were created from the tears of Re, R-E. Re then drew blood from his own penis and created the god Hu and Sia, which is H-E or H-U for Hu and Sia, S-I-A. These two gods represented the creative power of the gods. Hu and Sia were partners. Sia was the personification of divine knowledge, omniscience, and mind of the gods. Hu was the personification of divine utterance, the voice of authority. During ancient times, Heka, the personification of divine power, accompanied these two gods. Together, the three gods were very important to the rulers of ancient Egypt. Along with the falcon-headed sun god, they rode the sunboat across the sky in order to create and sustain all life. The act of the sunboat traveling across the sky signifies that with each sunrise the world was created anew. Having traveled through the underworld of night and making it pass all the dangers therein, the sunbow once again rises to confirm that life is created new each day. Hu was particularly important because he was the epitome of the power and command of the ruler, even after death. Hu was the utmost importance of the kings of ancient Egypt, who acted as the king's companion as the king entered the afterlife. Through Hu, the king maintained his royal authority in the afterlife. Hu allowed the king to cross the waters of his canal and acknowledged the king's authority and supremacy. So far, We know Hu as the personification of divine utterance. However, some legends maintain that he was not just a part of creation, that he was the creator. It is said that as Hu drew his first breath, there was in that sound of essence of his name. Hence, we have the name Hu, which sounds remarkable, the sound of an expelling breath. Hu. With each breath Hu expelled, creation took place. The first breath created the soul of Osiris. His last creation was the sun. So it is said that Hu is the word of God, the first and the last breath. Hu, Hu. The ancient Egyptians recognized the Sphinx at the Gaza Plateau as an image of Hu. The lion was a symbol of power and strength, used as the body of the Sphinx. This was perfectly acceptable to the ancient Egyptians. The face of the Sphinx wore the distinctive red crown of the creator and the Osiris beard. These were hallmarks of the time. It's been suggested that ancient Egyptians would use the Sphinx in a ritual that reenacted the creation of the universe. It was performed at dusk as night was falling upon Egypt. This was considered the time before creation began, when Hu, the Sphinx, sat silent. When the signal was given, the sound of the first word of creation filled the air. As people made the sound they recognized as that breath, Hu. This word, the word of God, would be chanted all through the night, symbolizing the night of progressive creating. The final act of the ritual came at sunrise, as the sun rose out of the east and the last breath of Hu was recognized. Sri S.R.I. Harold Klempt, K-L-E-M-P-T, spiritual leader of Eckankar, notes, Hu is the ancient name of God, a love song to God. When soul has heard this sound, soul yearns to go home. Eckankar uses the singing of Hu's name as a spiritual connection to the heart of God. They sing the name Hu to draw closer to the divine being. For the people who follow this faith, that the desires are reported to be love, freedom, wisdom, and truth. Eckankar teaches a spiritual essence. The light and sound connects everyone with the heart of God. This light and sound is the ECK, or Holy Spirit. Direct aspects of God opens the deep spiritual potential within each of us. The light and soul purify, uplift, and direct us on our journey to home. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Papyrus of Ani, mentions the ceremonies of Hu and Sa. One can only speculate as to the nature of such rituals and ceremonies. Could they be talking about the ancient rituals involving the Sphinx? Hu may be considered a minor god in some ways, but it's obvious that Hu was a not-so-minor god to most ancient Egyptians. Now, I'm almost done, so don't worry about it. I'm getting started now with Ptah, and then I will go into Hekar, and I will be done. Sekar. Sekar. Now Ptah, P-T-A-H, capital P at the beginning. In Egyptian mythology, Ptah is the demiurge of Memphis, god of craftsmen and architects. In the triad of Memphis, he is the husband of Sekhmet and the father of Nefertum. He was also regarded as the father of the sage Imhotep. The Greek knew him as the god Hephaestus, and in this form Manetho made him the first king of Egypt. Ptah is the patron of craftsmanship, metalworking, carpentry, shipbuilding, and sculpture. From the Middle Kingdom onward, he was one of 5 major Egyptian gods, with Ra, Isis, Osiris, and Amun. He wears many epithets that describe his role in Egyptian mythology and its importance in society at the time. Ptah, the beautiful face; Ptah, Lord of truth; Ptah, master of justice; Ptah, who listens to prayers; Ptah, master of ceremonies; Ptah, Lord of eternity. Ptah is the creator god par excellence. He is considered the demiurge who exists between all things, and by his willingness thought the world. It was first conceived by thought and realized by the word. Ptah conceives the world by the thought of his heart and gives life through the magic of his word. That which Ptah commanded was created, with which the constituents of nature, fauna, and flora are contained. He also plays a role in the preservation of the world and the permanence of the royal function. In the 25th dynasty, the Nubian pharaoh Shabaka would transcribe on a stela known as the Shabaka stone, an old theological document found in the archives of the library of the Temple of the God at Memphis. This document has been known as the Memphite theology and shows the god Ptah, the god responsible for the creation of the universe by thought and by the word. Like many deities of ancient Egypt, he takes many forms, though one of his particular aspects, or through syncretism of ancient deities of Memphite region, he is sometimes represented as a dwarf, naked and deformed, whose popularity would continue to grow during the late period. Frequently associated with the god Bes, B-E-S, capital B, at the beginning, his worship then exceeded the borders of the country and was exported throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Thanks to the Phoenicians, we find figures of Ptah in Carthage. Ptah is generally represented in the guise of a man with green skin. Interesting. Contained in a shroud sticking to the skin, wearing the divine beard and holding a scepter, combining 3 powerful symbols of Egyptian mythology: the was scepter, the sign of life, Ankh, the Djed pillar, From the Old Kingdom, he quickly absorbs the appearance of Sokar and Tetan. Sokar is spelled S-O-K-A-R, capital S at the beginning, and Tetanen is spelled T-A-T-E-N-E-N, capital T at the beginning. Ancient deities of the Memphite region. His form of Sokar is found contained in its white shroud, wearing the Atef crown. Atef, A-T-E-F, capital A at the beginning, and a tribute of Osiris. In this capacity, he represents the god of the necropolis of Saqqara, S-A-Q-Q-A-R-A, capital S at the beginning, and other famous sites where the royal pyramids were built. Gradually, he formed with Osiris a new deity called Ptah Stakar Osiris. Ptah, P-T-A-H /Sokar, S-O-K-A-R /Osiris, O-S-I-R-I-S. Statuettes representing the human form, half human, half hawk, or simply in its falcon form, will be systematically placed in tombs to accompany and protect the dead on their journey to the west. The Tetanen form is represented by a young and vigorous man wearing a crown with two tall plumes that surround the solar disk. He thus embodies the underground fire that rumbles and raises the earth. As such, he was particularly revered by metalworkers and blacksmiths, but he was equally feared because it was him who caused earthquakes and tremors of the earth's crust. In this form also, Ptah is the master of ceremonies for Heb Shed, H-E-B, capital H at the beginning, and Sed, S-E-D, capital S at the beginning. A ceremony traditionally attesting to the first 30 years of the pharaoh's reign. The god Ptah could be opposite the sun god Re, or Aten, during the Amarna period, where he embodied the divine essence with which the sun god was fed to come into existence, that is to say, to be born, according to the Memphite mythological text. In the Holy of Holies of his temple, the Memphis, as well as in his great sacred boat, he drove in procession to regularly visit the region during major holidays. Ptah was also symbolized by two birds with human heads adorned with solar discs, symbols of the souls of the god Re. And these rays are spelled R-E, not R-A. The two Ba are also identified as the twin gods Shu and Tefnut. Shu, S-H-U, capital S at the beginning, and Tefnut, T-E-F-N-U-T, capital T at the beginning, and are associated with the Djed pillar of Memphis. Djed, D-J-E-D, all lowercase. Finally, Ptah is embodied in the sacred bull, Apis, frequently referred to as Herald of Ra. A sacred animal is the link with the god Ra from the New Kingdom. He even receives worship in Memphis, probably at the heart of the great temple of Ptah, and its death was buried with all the honors due to a living God in the Sheripium of Saqqara. Ptah was assimilated by the Greeks to the god Hephaestus, and then by the Romans to Vulcan. Okay, development of the cult. As god of craftsmen, the cult of the god Ptah quickly spread throughout Egypt. With the major royal projects of the Old Kingdom, the high priests of Ptah were particularly sought after and worked in concert with the vizier, somehow filling the role of chief architect and master craftsman responsible for the decoration of the royal funerary complexes. In the new kingdom, the cult of the god would develop in different ways, especially in Memphis, his homeland, but also in Thebes, where the workers of the royal tomb honored him for his quality as patron of craftsmen. It is for this reason that the oratory of Ptah who listens to prayers was built near the site of Deir el Medina, the village where the workers and craftsmen were confined. At Memphis, the role of intercessor with men was particularly visible in the appearance of the enclosure that protected the sanctuary of the god. Large ears were carved in the walls and symbolized his role as God who listens to men. With the 19th dynasty, his cult grew and he became one of the four great gods of the empire of Ramses. He was worshipped as Pi Ramesses, as master of ceremonies and coronations. Now, if that doesn't sound hermetic, then I don't know what does. That's just, that's amazing. I just read this again after a long time, and that really stuck. With the third intermediate period, Ptah returned to the center of the monarchy, where the coronation of the pharaoh was held again in his temple. The Ptolemies continued this tradition, and the high priests of Ptah were then increasingly associated with the royal family, some of who even married princesses of blood, clearly indicating the prominent role they played in the Ptolemaic court. Main places of worship: temple dedicated to location, Ptah P. Ramses, Ptah Memphis, Ptah who listens to prayer in Memphis, Ptah who is south of his wall in Memphis, Ptah Saqqara, Abydos, Ptah Saqqara, Qam el Hatin in Thebes, Ptah who listens to prayers, Deir el Medina in Thebes, Ptah Karnak in Thebes, Ptah Gerf Hussein in Nubia, Ptah Lord of Truth, Abu Simbel in Nubia. The English name Egypt derives from an ancient Egyptian name for Memphis, Hiku-Ptah, which means home of the soul of Ptah. This entered ancient Greek as Agathos, which entered Latin as Egyptus, which developed into English as Egypt. Pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to do Sekur. It's spelled Seker, capital S at the beginning. Sekur, also spelled Sokar, Sokr, is a falcon god in the Memphite necropolis. Although the meaning of his name is uncertain, the Egyptians in the pyramid text linked his name to the anguished cry of Osiris to Isis. Sai-Kai-Rai, hurry to me. In the underworld, Sekur is strongly linked with two other gods, Ptah, the chief god of Memphis, and Osiris, the god of the dead. In later periods, this connection was expressed as the triple god Ptah, Sekur, Osiris. Sekur was usually depicted as a mummified hawk that sometimes as a hawk and sometimes as mound from which the head of the hawk appears. Here he is called he who is on his sand. Sometimes he is shown in his Henu Barku, which was an elaborate sledge for negotiating the sandy necropolis. One of his titles was Hay of Rastu, which means the place of openings or tomb entrances. In the New Kingdom book of the underworld, the Amduat, he is shown standing on the back of a serpent between two spread wings as an expression of freedom. This suggests a connection with resurrection or perhaps a satisfactory transit of the underworld. Despite this, the region of the underworld associated with Sekur was seen as difficult sandy terrain called the Imhet, Imhet, capital I at the beginning, meaning filled up. Sekur possibly through his association with Ptah, also has a connection with craftsmen. In the Book of the Dead, he is said to fashion silver bowls and a silver coffin of Sheshank the second, which is Sheshonq, and then the second. And silver coffin of Sheshank II has been discovered at Tanis, decorated with the iconography of Sekur. In the 1956 movie The Ten Commandments, the Pharaoh Ramses II invokes the same deity to bring his deceased firstborn son back to life, while portrayed as wearing dark blue robe with a silver bow. Sekur's cult center was in Memphis, where festivals in his honor were held in the 4th month of the Aked spring season. The god was depicted as assisting in various tasks such as digging ditches and canals. From the New Kingdom, a similar festival was held in Thebes. Okay, so that is the Sakar, and like I said, this is just to start out with some Egyptian terms, some meanings about the afterlife and their gods and things like that before I start doing my story, which concerns hermetics and uh, mystery schools, because I'm just going to go ahead and get involved in it and start doing it. I was thinking about it, I mean, YouTube isn't monetizing anymore, so I really don't care how many people view my videos. If you don't like it and you're not interested in seeing it, then I don't really care. When I get to 10,000 views, I'm not going to monetize on YouTube anyhow, because I disagree with that quite a bit. They even sent me a survey asking me how do I feel that they are helpful to new creators, and I point blank gave them thumbs down on everything in my survey of them. I disapprove with what they're doing, and I think that that's a BS move. They don't encourage new creators to go forward and everything. I mean, that pretty much tells me they don't give a care about me. They care about the guy making them money. So from now on, I'm gonna post what I want to post and the things that I'm interested in, and I don't care. You know, that's just the way I'm gonna be with it. So I hope you guys enjoyed my really, really long video. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for sticking around and watching and listening to this video. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.